So in the last set of slides, I discussed a simple model about tokens as utility tokens, where the firm sells future revenue or future output as opposed to selling future profits. And I showed you how that could work as a means of finance. What I want to do now is I want to take a step back and look more broadly at the business of a blockchain and thinking about how we can use a blockchain as a business in terms of forming a business or any form of commercial activity. And so for that, I want to go back to the video that I showed in the first class on what a blockchain would do. I'm not going to play the video here for this set of slides because why? But everybody can see this. But let me just go back of what we saw. So what happened here? Well, Kramer wanted to give Newman the radar detector, and Newman wanted to give Kramer the helmet, and they couldn't agree on the trade. So what happened? Well, they needed, in order for this to work, they needed trust, right? They needed to trust that the other party would let go at exactly the same time as when you would let go yourself. So what happened? Well, Jerry came in and became the trusted intermediary. So he created the trust. So the core message is neither party trusts that the exchange would happen. Jerry injected himself, became an escrow, therefore became the trusted party, and he enabled the spot exchange. Now, in this particular case, this was centralized trust. And what a blockchain is, at its core, is decentralized trust. We discussed that before. So now let's think about what that means for business models, though. So, when you think about the internet, what the internet did essentially was the exchange of information. So it allowed the copying of information dramatically. And we now know that this gave rise to Napster and all kinds of music sharing business. It was great for universities because all of a sudden we could share our knowledge without having to print them in books and shipping books and articles around and writing letters to one another. We could just do all of this electronically at extremely small cost. So it's great. So what is a blockchain? Well, a blockchain is a technology that disintermediates trust. Yeah, so that is its core what it does. So what can it do? Well, it can do these peer-to-peer value transfers without trusted third parties. It can do contract execution. Huh? So this is what Ethereum aims to do. It wants to be a decentralized mechanism for code execution. So all of these situations where you don't know if the other party is actually doing what it promises to do is something that a blockchain can possibly solve. And finally, and this is what many of the ICO entities were working on, is to have some self-powered platforms where the users have control over the platform, but there's no intermediary business model that would create, an exchange of buyers to sellers and so on. So now what much of this does is the common outcome here is that there's some form of disintermediation, and somehow my slide got caught. So in other words, so peer-to-peer, contract execution, all of self-powered, all of this eliminates some form of an intermediary. Now, what does that mean? What are the challenges with it? Well, our current world, if you take an approach where you say, I want to take the current world with many trusted parties and intermediaries and disintermediate it, that is not a simple task from a business perspective. So that even though you can dream it up, there are some real challenges here. So what are they? Well, let's look at the question you have to ask yourself is, who is it that you disintermediate, and who is your customer? So let me give this an example for security trading, because that's something which we talked about at length, and you guys are all in finance, so this is something that you will be interested in. So normally, the whole point about a financial market is that issuers and investors can come together. Now, there's banks in between. Banks have all kinds of intermediary roles of term intermediation, risk intermediation, size intermediation, all that. But, you could imagine maybe there's a technological solution for that doesn't require a banker, that can work automatically. So is there a way that you can get issuer and investor together? Well, that's actually a very, very hard task, because the issuers usually don't know who the investors are. Think of a startup. Think of, any firm that wants to approach investors. That's a very difficult problem, and it is one which requires a lot of effort. So this is, so the direct contact between the two is not straightforward. And, so normally an issuer, what they do is they go through a broker dealer. Now, the broker dealer actually often doesn't approach the investors individually either. He actually goes through further intermediaries, which would be investment advisors, those that manage the accounts of multiple different clients. So, there is a role that these intermediaries play, and bringing the issuer and the investor together directly is actually a hard problem. So the question is, once you start an disintermediation platform, for instance, to bring issuers, investors together, who really are your customers? Is it the broker dealer? Or is it maybe the investment advisors? Or is it the investor and the issuer? So this is, these are questions that are, of first order importance is if you want to build a business. So now, this is obviously not, something new. If you ever had a business course on business strategy, you will have seen this picture that I'm just throwing up, which is that of the business canvas, right? When you have a business and you want to determine what your business idea is, everybody would, the first thing you need in management studies is fill out this form of a business canvas. So who are your key partners? What are your key activity, your resources? What's your value proposition, and so on and so forth. So let's take an example here of an exempt market dealer, right? So these would be the ones where the buyers and sellers would put together. Who are key partners? Well, trading tech firms, lawyers. What are the key activities? Well, matching issuers and investors. What are the key resources? You need an office, you need connections, you need a brand and reputation for that. What's your value proposition? You want to connect issuers and investors, get the deal done, perform the due diligence on the deals, provide access to a deep pool of capital, so that's for your issuers, and provide access to attractive investments. Let me jump here quickly to the customers that you have. Well, the customers would be small and medium issuers, so these are firms that seek funding. And on the one hand, because you're a matchmaker, on the other hand, you have retail and institutional investors. Who are your customer relationships? Well, these would be accounts that you already have and advisors. And what are the channels for you to reach your customers? It's usually the advisors, it's word of mouth and relationships. So these are your advisors. And you can maybe also advertise yourself at competitions, accelerators, and so on. But generally speaking, this is a system which has been tried and worked for a very long time. What costs do you have? Well, you have a staff in your office, you have relationship management, so you need to actually make sure people keep you in mind. You have legal and compliance costs, probably substantial, and you have record keeping and some tech costs. How do you make money? Well, account fees, transaction fees, and issuance fees. So this is a well-established model. Now ask yourself the question, if you want to disintermediate this world, how would that work? Well, first of all, disintermediation, the value proposition of partners, many of these items actually stay the same, right? So the key activity, if you disintermediate it, if you want to build a platform, this platform has to have a matching process of issuers and investors. The customers are still, if you want to go directly with disintermediating the investment dealer, it's still going to be the ultimate customers are going to be the retail investors, institutional investors. Now, what's your value proposition? Well, you still want to connect issuers and investors. You still want to get the deal done. You want to have access to deep pools of capital. And you want to, but now it gets difficult. Your platform wants to have the due diligence on the deals. Now, that's going to be a really hard problem to solve if you want to have it in a disintermediated manner. So in other words, you can disintermediate the transfer of the assets, and you maybe can disintermediate the value, the interaction there, but getting the due diligence done by a platform, that's really hard. Now, then you need to establish the accounts and advisors. So, you may be able, you still have advisors in there that connect you to the issuers. Are you going to get rid of those too? You need to get the accounts. If you want to get the accounts, where are they going to come from? How do you going to acquire your customers? That's a really difficult part. This brings me to the channels. Word of mouth, relationship, and competitions. Well, maybe you can go to accelerators, but everything else there for a platform is not there. So in the existing world, you have no place. So this is something to think about. How can you design a platform, which is not just a thing that you put out there and then just hope people will come. You build them and people will come. You have to think really hard how you can make this work. So my personal take would be, in this case, you actually would want to take an intermediate step and have your customer be not the issuers directly, but be the investment dealer and build a platform for them. All right, so that brings me to the bigger thing. So the discussion, and this is the in-class discussion which we'll hopefully have, is what trusted roles actually exist and which ones could be disintermediated by a platform. Then do we need to establish and incentivize the establishment of trust on this platform? So the interaction, the transactions of buyers and sellers is probably possible, but the due diligence is a really hard problem. And so now once you do this, and once you think that you can possibly incentivize the establishment, you have to figure out the kind of incentives that you want to issue, that you want to use.